Welcome back to another video on Gearsaw Studios, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build this giant megabase, the giant tree, and the bees with it, and it even comes in with a little base on the inside. So without further ado, let's investigate how we'd go about this, and yes, it is a very large structure. Starting off, make sure that you have an area. Doesn't have to be any specific area, of course. Maybe don't do this in the Badlands, but something like just in the middle of a forest works pretty well. And then what we want to do is place down an oak log. And of course I'm going to do block by block for this part, but just take a look at it and you can see how it has individual pixels. What you can do is you can take a picture of it and then analyze its colors using an external tool. And that's why there's a link tree in the description for exactly this. Luckily, I do all the hard work for you. But there's a bit of an issue. You can see how on the edges, they don't correspond perfectly. Right here, you can see how a light pixel here isn't necessarily going to be a light pixel on that side. Which means we have two options. Either we build an 18 by 18 and cut off the corners, or we build a 16 by 16 and have slightly inaccurate sides. And personally, I'm going to go for a 16 by 16, but of course, I'm going to be providing images so that way you can do either form. Then make yourself a base plate. This is not super important, it's just to flatten the area so that way you don't actually have to do any flattening. And then from here, we can start color coding exactly how we're going to do this pixel by pixel. Right here, I have a high visibility version of the oak log texture. And yes, this looks like modern art or something like that, but that's completely intentional. This is where every pixel color is. Notice there's only 6 colors on the entire oak log, which makes our job a lot easier. Now I've pre-selected a bunch of blocks here you can see in the bottom right, and here's how I'm going to do it. Click. Now all the reds are brown mushrooms. On Bedrock Edition, you might have to sub it out. Yellow, packed mud. We can try something like green being spruce planks. Maybe purple is something dark like that. And then we can have cyan, and then, well, you can see I substituted all the blocks and that looks a lot like an oak log. And well, it can be a little bit of a convoluted process, but the point still stands. Right here, I have created an oak log by substituting colors and just using the rough pixel colors. How I did this? Simple. Imported this texture into a color picker tool, and then after that, the color picker tool goes into a Minecraft color to block selector. If the blocks aren't good, then I choose one myself, and then I import it into the game. It's multi-stepped, but it's certainly an effective one. Now, what I said about the whole, do you want to do 16 or 18? This would be 18, and you can see how it has that awkward corner. And, oh wait, I mirrored it the wrong way, but the point still stands. You can see awkward corner. And how are you going to do that for the leaves? So we have to cut that out. Now, right here, I'm just going to make it 16, which isn't the most accurate, but if I do it like this, then I'll have an easier time in general. And now, well, hey, I have an oak log. If you pay close enough attention, it's kind of obvious that the corners are different. But luckily, if you actually mirror yours right, because you can see I accidentally made them perfectly symmetrical, don't do that. Well, you'll have a very interesting oak log, and then you can tile it. With our log now in place, nicely textured, we want to repeat this a few times. And yes, I said repeat like that, I don't know why. And we want to go for the shape of a tree, which means we put this 3 blocks up. And by blocks, I mean 16 by 16s. So like this, and what do you know? We have a tree trunk, and it looks really cool from afar. And then if you have that stone foundation, then simply tile it into there as well. Now you have a giant tree stem. And well, this alone is already pretty cool looking. For the inside, quick tip, just place down some torches. We do not want monsters in here. And then after we do that, Then we can do the same exact process for leaves. And leaves are a bit more interesting because you can see right here, well, they're transparent. And as much as I'd like to do that, that's a little bit too much work for survival. So let's pull out the ultimate trump card for this. Wait a moment. Alright, transparency off, carry on. And now we have this texture, which is a lot easier to work with because we just have plain black background. For Bedrock Edition, it might have more greens mixed into there. It's up to you whether you want to use the Java or Bedrock fast texture. But essentially, we take a screenshot, we put this into the color picker, and then we choose our colors, import this into the game, and then make the cubes. Only build the faces that you can actually see from the outside if you're doing this from survival mode. Otherwise, you're just going to waste a lot of time. Right here is another high contrast texture, this one of oak leaves. Of course, you can use all the methods here in order to build any kind of tree. Of course, well, dark oak might be a bit difficult, but besides that, what we want to do is worry about something. Yes, I know I usually say don't worry. Nope, we actually have to worry for once. What about the bottom face? Unlike the logs, we actually have to worry about the bottom face. And this is where it can get a little bit difficult because it might not tile very well. Fortunately, this thing already doesn't tile super well, but it's good enough. To give an example of what I mean, increase this to 16 false, and what do you know? It's good enough, but you can see if you're paying close attention where the actual demarcations are, where you can figure out where this texture is splitting. And then I undo that. Well, what we can do is just plaster the texture on the bottom. What I recommend doing first is, well, making sure it's all correctly mirrored. And remember, you can have it look the same on corners, but make sure there's not any obvious inconsistencies. So 90 like this, and then 90 again, and then another 90. And then with that, you can see I have a texture. Then the top and bottom, we can do whatever we have on this face, and I'm going to highlight the selection. We want to do this, except flipped downward. So it's a interesting selection, but it's the inner 14 blocks of it. It doesn't matter which direction it's facing, but if you're making the build face this way, assuming that you want it to go somewhere, then it would make sense to do it like this, the way my character is moving. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to explain, but essentially just make top and bottom textures. It's not super important, but it's required. With this incredibly high contrast leaf block now done, on the bottom, you can't tell too much that I had to manually insert those textures myself, but you kind of can if you're looking for it. Essentially, nobody's going to notice. Now, we just substitute in the colors. I'm going to just do them in the order where I have them in my hotbar. Very simple process. And then, just like this, then we got leaves. Are they the most unique leaves? No, but they get the point across. You might want to substitute the black for something a little less harsh in the future, but now we have our leaf block. And this is, well, incredibly important because now we can actually work on the tree itself. Of course, don't do faces that are, well, not visible. And for reference, yes, this is very agonizingly painful to do in survival mode. And then we go out one, up like this, and then doing a little bit of some sort of bee dance mid-air in order to do this. Well, now we have segments of the tree. And not too much to say about this besides, well, it's going to be a very large tree. You can analyze the shape of the other trees in the area in order to figure out how you should do this one. Now, I have all the leaves in place. You can see how it is, well, a really, really large Minecraft tree. And that's all there is to it. You can see some of the tiling on it. It's much less visible in game usually, but you can see with fast graphics, it can get really noticeable really quickly, especially at this sort of scale. In response, you might want to make small adjustments to the texture on reducing the size of this specific lump here with the black concrete, and going in manually changing it in order to make it look better. Otherwise, this is, well, a giant Minecraft tree, and then we can continue to the rest of the build. Now, well, I turned off the night vision, and you've probably noticed this mid-build, we have a little bit of an issue. And this is exactly why we are not putting the base into the actual tree, because it's a little bit dark now. And we can solve this by simply adding a little bit of black stained glass to the top, so that way, well, light can come through. Nobody's really going to be looking from this right here. I mean, it's almost that cloud layer, there's nothing up here. So we should be able to safely replace all the black concrete with glass. It won't be very noticeable at a distance, but it'll make sure that there's at least some lighting down there. And this can be done with simple fill commands. Of course, I'm going to be using World Edit for it because, I'm a little bit pressed for time. But the idea still stands. Go in here, select, and then you replace, and we can select the whole tree all the way down. And well, there's not much else to say about this necessarily. It's just a little bit of simple replacement. Get a little bit of black concrete, and what do you know? It's a lot more visible, and it keeps in some of those fast versus fancy graphic stuff. And thus, we can solve the shadow problem completely with a bit of glass. With the glass replaced, you can see why this specific example, why I didn't just immediately go for the glass. It just doesn't work like this. You can see it's a little bit too green, and you might like this style and might want to go with it. But of course, if you're doing this with structure blocks or world edit, you can see all these interior pieces. It would be a lot more feasible for a completely manual survival build. But for creative mode purposes, I'm going to keep it right back to black concrete for the most part. Just making sure that on the tops we have glass to make sure we don't have the mob infestation downstairs. You have to be careful exactly how you're using your commands, but the idea still stands. We just need to have a bit of glass. And now, the same process I used for the logs and the leaves, do this for a bee nest. Fortunately, the bee nest isn't super complicated, it's only one block. And for the front, well, just make the front texture. You will need 2 images, but don't worry, I will be providing high contrast versions as well. Just for a quick look, this is how it looks from the bottom with the glass adjustments. Is it perfect? No, but it does provide the necessary lighting to keep it all safe, and it's better than a harsh shadow. So we have a half fancy, half fast tree. No fabulous included though. But regardless, it's an interesting concept to have the lighting in here while still maintaining some of that blocky design on the outside. And just to prove, here, I'm going to disable night vision. Doesn't have the effect, which means the problem has been completely solved. Change it to midnight, and you can see no lighting differences. Change it back to day, works completely fine, which I'd say this is a big win. Now, of course, we move on to the beehive. Right here, now that we have those transparent leaves, we can start building the actual beehive. I recommend placing it right here somewhere, and of course we're using the same logic we used with the leaves and the logs. By the way, for the corners of the logs, you see these brown concretes here? Make sure you mix it up a little. Of course, we can't do a ton of things to it, but simply from afar, it's too easy to notice the tiling. It's also kind of easy to notice the tiling on the leaves, but unfortunately there's not too much we can do about that one. But the logs we can definitely sort out. Now for our high contrast images of the bee nest, you can see there are a lot of colors. It was terrible to try and do this. I straight up had to use non-concrete colors. And we still have the roof and the bottom. But still, this is a good starting point. All you need to do is substitute the colors for roughly what you think they are. It's okay if some of these high contrasts here end up becoming the same block. Because, well, there's simply a little bit too much going on that we might just run out of yellow-brown shades. So it's completely fine. Either way, build this, worry about the corners, then worry about the top and bottom. Right here, with all the crazy colors now adjusted into more normal stuff, you can see I have a bee nest. Some of the pixels got merged into the same blocks, had to recolor it several times because it ended up becoming mostly oak planks, which was not very good looking. And well, it is perfectly survival friendly. I know that there's floating brown concrete powder here, but there's string under it, which means no issues actually found. Can be a little bit expensive, but if you did the leaves, then I have, well, no issues with you doing this. Right here, you can see completed interior in terms of just the walls. The top, well, it's just a pixel consistent top. Nothing too crazy to worry about. The bottom is the exact same thing, except, well, different colors. Yeah, they're actually the same texture, just different colors, which is pretty interesting. Now if I turn off the night vision, it is very dark in here, and it's kind of dark under it, but otherwise not too many issues, which is pretty good. This means that we can actually start constructing this. If you want to add honey to this, you'd probably use actual honey blocks along with some orange honeycomb, stuff like that. But since we have two entrances, we should start by making this a 2-layer base. Along with that, feel free to add stuff to the walls like paintings or double thick walls in order to make it a bit more house-like. And of course, make sure that it's actually accessible. If you're building this without an elytra, you know, maybe set up a little platform somewhere on it for happy ghasts. Simple things like that. With our bee nest right here, you can see it's kind of dark on the inside, but I'm making some strides to make this, well, better. So let's just cover what I'm doing. Of course, bee nest ready. And when we go to the base of the tree, notice right here I have some glow lichen to keep the water out and a bubble elevator up. It only goes up. You can make a fall down chute and stuff like that. The inside, I just used oak and spruce planks, nothing too crazy. And well, yeah, I just needed a way to get up that didn't involve elytras. And if you're building this, you probably have an elytra by now, so I'm not super concerned. If you need more room, you can use a canopy and the rest of the logs inside. But anyways, you can see right here, I have some lighting in the form of ultra frog lights hidden behind honey, and how the honey is pouring down. This helps a lot. The ground you can see is raised a little with birch. I'm going to try incorporating some moss into this, and notice the ground with the carpets alternating, done in a unique pattern. You can analyze how I actually built it, but I recommend placing them as needed and then trying some different colors of carpet. You could even try moss if you want this to be a more greenery related build. And what we want to do from here is make sure there's a second floor somewhere right here, and then add a staircase somewhere in here. Maybe even some sort of spiral staircase or a long one in the back, something in order to get up and down, and then you can use the area under it for other things. Now I'm getting some work done on the interior. First off, you can see, well, we have the bubble elevator in here. I already showed off the honey. And then the floor, it's now acacia. Added some honeycomb to the walls. I'm going to use a lot of it this time. I mean, if you got this far and you don't have bees set up, I'd probably be a little bit confused. And then, of course, more ultra frog lights. In order to get up and down, I have some cave vines here. Made some bone meal to have glowberries on them. Shear them to make sure they don't grow any further. Then right here, some utilities. We're just going to add a bunch of utilities into here, plaster things on the wall. We can add actual bees into the build in order to add a little bit of ambience. Don't forget spore blossoms exist. Things like that. And then, when we're done, we can elytra out of the building. Now, I have the interior complete. You can see just a bunch of random amenities, carpets, enchanting, things like that. And, well, it's perfectly livable. And there's not a super high amount of decoration in here, but still, it's pretty nice having a lot of things in here. If you're running out of room, then, well, you have the rest of the tree. And then I added some bee nests. Notice what I do with the honeycomb. Some of those terracotta blocks are being used for empty cells. and then the sheared pieces of glowberry vine, things like that. And then we have our furnaces, enchanting. Notice the sideways looms, and the chiseled bookshelves. Still reaches level 30 though. Some chests here, pots randomly, and then we have an ender chest with a pot with a flower. And yeah, it's actually all perfectly serviceable. Then if we ever want to get out, by the way, brewing stands right there, we can jump onto this. You do take 4.5 hearts of damage. So assuming you built exactly like me, not the best way to get down. But hey, at least it's something. And also all the spore blossoms added some honey dripping down from the hive. And well, that's just a nice little detail. You might want to remove some trees down here to add some honey. But now for the star of the show, the bees. And I'm not going to show directly one by one with high contrast images, mainly because bees are really just built the same every single time. In this case, what you want to do is just pause the video at the frames you need, so that way you can just copy it one for one. It's not something where you can do it slight altercations, different blocks. I mean, technically you could sub out some of the blocks, but I think I did a pretty good job with this one. And yeah, this is an unpollinated bee. You can see the stingers and antennae are being done with walls, which is pretty funny. These are being levitated with string, very small. And then right here, I have a bunch of different white blocks to represent the pollen. Now, I'm not entirely sure what it's doing going right into that tree rather than the hive, but I'm not going to question it. As for the legs, you can add them. I'd probably just do them with black terracotta. In fact, I think I'm going to add them real quick. With their little legs attached, well, we have a completed build. 3 giant bees, a giant bee nest, and an excessively large tree. Is this survival friendly? Not really. Can you do this without world edit? It's going to be very tedious. But if you really want to do all this, well, hey, now you know how. And you can see it is, well, meticulously designed per pixel, so that way you have the most accurate experience. And these bees here can be used for little things like storage or other mounted objects. And of course, inside you have a base, whether it be something small or you incorporate things like the entire trunk into it or even the canopy for a Megabase. Still, you have something going on. And well, it's a fantastic addition to your world, very visible from a distance, no more losing your base. And yeah, I'd say if you have the time and are crazy enough to do it, well, maybe give it a try. It's really fun building giant structures like these. But either way, it's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed this video, remember, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. And I'm going to be focusing a bit more on the channel now that summer is here. So yeah, just keep an eye out for all that stuff. And the editing quality is going to increase with that. Either way, enjoy the rest of your day. Gearsaw out.